My friends, when God speaks, his words are not suggestions, they are declarations of divine law. And when he said in Psalms 121, the Lord is your keeper, the Lord is your shade upon your right hand, he wasn't just comforting you, he was legislating your protection into existence. You see, evil is not just an event, it's an assignment. And every assignment of evil that rises against a child of God must pass through the shield of divine authority before it can ever reach you. This prayer, this sacred alignment with Psalms 121, is not an empty ritual, it is a spiritual covenant. When you pray it with understanding, heaven records your words and the universe begins to rearrange itself to guard your destiny. The sun cannot strike you by day, the moon cannot harm you by night, because your covering is not man-made, it's God-ordained. You are not walking alone. You are walking under surveillance of divine protection. Every step you take is guarded. Every path you choose is guided. And every battle you face is already seen and sealed by the keeper of Israel, who neither slumbers nor sleeps. After this prayer, evil does not disappear, it becomes powerless. Attacks do not cease, they lose authority. For when you dwell in revelation, no darkness can overpower your light. God did not promise that you will never see evil, but he did promise that evil will never touch you. And that, my friends, is the confidence of Psalms 121. When God declares his word, it is not merely a verse to be recited, it is a decree from eternity, a covenant written into the spiritual framework of the universe. Psalms 121 is not just a psalm of comfort, it is a revelation of divine protection that activates supernatural defense mechanisms around those who truly understand and apply it. When God said, I will lift up my eyes to the hills from whence comes my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth, he was not only reminding you where your help originates, he was establishing the source of your preservation. Evil cannot touch what heaven guards, and heaven guards what belongs to God. You must understand that divine protection is not an emotional feeling, it is a spiritual reality anchored in covenant relationship. Evil in this world operates through systems, through intentions, through unseen forces that seek to distract, destroy, and distort the purpose of God in your life. But when you enter into prayer through Psalms 121, you are stepping into a divine contract that makes you invisible to harm. The word becomes your shield, your covering, your defense system. It is written, the Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade upon your right hand. The meaning of that phrase is deep shade represents divine defense from heat, pressure, and exposure. It means that even when the world around you burns with chaos, you will remain cool under his shadow. The nature of divine protection is relational. It is not given to everyone. It is activated through faith, obedience, and alignment. God watches over those who are aligned with his principles. The psalm says, he will not suffer your foot to be moved. That means your position, your purpose, and your destiny are stabilized under his governance. Evil may come to shake you, but it cannot move you. It can approach, but it cannot penetrate. For the shield of the Lord is not made of iron, it is made of word, spirit, and truth. Prayer, when grounded in revelation, becomes more than words, it becomes legislation. Every time you declare Psalms 121 inches faith, you are not praying for protection, you are enforcing it. You are activating the ancient laws of heaven that govern divine safety. Heaven recognizes covenant language, and Psalms 121 is exactly that. It's a covenantal declaration of divine jurisdiction over your life. When you say, the Lord is my keeper, you are telling every dark force that your life is under new management. You are drawing a boundary line in the spirit realm that says no trespassing, no invasion, no corruption of destiny. The phrase, he that keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep, is a profound truth. It reveals that your protection is not momentary, it's continuous. God's guardianship over you does not pause when you rest, when you travel, when you fail, or when you fear. His eyes are fixed upon you not because you are perfect, but because you are positioned in his will. Evil thrives in places of disconnection. It loses power in places of alignment. As long as your spirit remains connected to his word, his protection remains active. Consider this. The Lord being your keeper means that your spirit, your mind, and your body are under divine surveillance. Heaven does not simply react to evil, it anticipates it. Before danger comes near, the word already stands between you and the threat. That's why no evil can touch you after this prayer, not because the world becomes safer, but because you become surrounded. You are not safe because evil does not exist. You are safe because God exists with you. When you pray Psalms 121, something shifts in the atmosphere. It is as if God Himself repositions His presence around you like an invisible fortress. Angels take new assignments. Paths are cleared. Plans of destruction are cancelled before they begin. Every time you say, "The Lord shall preserve you from all evil," you are activating a heavenly network that moves faster than any human threat. This preservation does not only protect your body, it secures your purpose, your emotions, your relationships, your finances, your calling. Evil attacks what is valuable. And if you are valuable to God, He assigns you supernatural security. The concept of no evil can touch you is not poetic exaggeration. It is a kingdom reality. To be untouchable is to be spiritually covered by divine jurisdiction. It means that even when storms rage, they cannot overturn the Pesach vessel of your destiny. Evil may circle your life, but it cannot land. Why? Because Psalms 121 declares that the Lord shall preserve your going out and your coming in. That is comprehensive coverage. He protects you when you move and when you rest, when you rise and when you sleep. Every exit and every entrance of your life is sealed by divine authority. There is a difference between being delivered from evil and being preserved from evil. Deliverance comes after attack. Preservation prevents the attack from manifesting. Psalms 121 does not merely promise deliverance, it promises preservation. That means God is not waiting for evil to strike before He intervenes. He is already standing at the gate of your life, intercepting danger before it reaches your reality. Evil may plan, but heaven preempts. The prayer of Psalms 121 is not defensive, it's preemptive. It blocks danger before danger becomes visible. But this covenant operates through your awareness. You must believe, you must declare, and you must stand in the revelation of divine covering. The reason many people still experience fear is not because God is absent, but because faith is inactive. You cannot activate what you do not understand. When you pray, "The Lord shall preserve your soul," you are commanding alignment between your inner world and divine truth. Your soul, your thoughts, your emotions, your will comes under the control of divine peace. Evil may send anxiety, but the peace of God intercepts it. Evil may send confusion, but divine clarity dissolves it. Evil may send temptation, but divine conviction shields you. This psalm teaches that God's protection is not passive, it's alive, dynamic, and intelligent. It knows your path, your timing, your vulnerabilities. When you rise in the morning and recite these words, you are activating a spiritual firewall that cannot be breached. Every decision you make under the covering of Psalms 121 becomes guided. Every door you walk through is guarded. You are not walking alone, you are walking with a presence that watches, preserves, and sustains. That's why you must never underestimate the power of this prayer. When spoken in faith, it rewrites your spiritual atmosphere. It places your name on heaven's protection registry. It becomes a declaration that hell must recognize and respect. You don't need to see the angels to know they are there. You only need to believe the word that promises they are. Psalms 121 is not a ritual, it's a revelation. And revelation creates reality. When you stand on that revelation, no evil, no force, no darkness can touch you. Because when God declares preservation, it is eternal. His word does not fail. His covering does not fade. And His promise remains unshaken. Preservation is not a coincidence, it is a divine law written into the order of creation. When God formed you, He didn't just design your body, He assigned protection to your purpose. Every human being carries within them a divine assignment. And wherever there is purpose, there must be preservation. The moment God said in Psalms 121, "The Lord shall preserve you from all evil," He wasn't offering comfort, He was establishing a principle. This is not a wish, it's a law. A law that ensures whatever is born of divine intent cannot be destroyed by evil. To preserve means to keep something in its original form, to maintain its integrity, to shield it from corruption and decay. In spiritual terms, preservation means that God sustains your destiny in the midst of a decaying world. Evil seeks to erode your purpose, to contaminate your thoughts, to weaken your conviction, but preservation is God's system of maintenance. When you align with this law, you live under a kind of spiritual immunity. Attacks may come, but they fail to alter who you are because your identity is sealed by divine preservation. The law of preservation operates by covenant and by consciousness. Covenant means that God has already declared the boundary of evil concerning your life. Consciousness means that you must live aware of that truth. It's not enough for God to declare it, you must walk in it. The psalmist says he will not allow your foot to be moved. That means your stability is not dependent on circumstances but on revelation. When you are preserved, even when life shakes, you remain grounded. Evil may push, but it cannot remove what God has anchored. Preservation is not the absence of danger, it is the assurance that danger cannot define your outcome. Look around the world today. Fear dominates minds, chaos fills systems, and uncertainty shadows every season. Yet the preserved man or woman of God stands unmoved. Why? Because their environment does not determine their safety, their covenant does. They know that the law of preservation is stronger than the law of destruction. The same way gravity pulls all things downward, preservation lifts the righteous upward. It is a counterforce of divine grace that defies the weight of evil. Every promise in Psalms 121 is a legal statement in the court of heaven. The Lord is your keeper means he has taken personal responsibility for your safety. It's as though God signs a security contract over your life with his own name. When you live under divine preservation, your life is not left to chance, it is managed by divine intelligence. You are watched over, not occasionally but perpetually. The scripture continues, the Lord shall preserve your soul. This preservation is not just physical, it's spiritual, emotional, and mental. God is not only concerned with your body, he guards your inner world. The human soul is the battlefield of life. That's where fear, doubt, and temptation dwell. Evil does not first attack your body, it attacks your thoughts. Because if it can control your thoughts, it can corrupt your destiny. But divine preservation shields your mind from infection. It creates a filter of truth that prevents lies from taking root. When you meditate on Psalms 121, your mind becomes sanctified. Your emotions are stabilized. Your confidence is restored. That's how the law of preservation works. It doesn't always change the environment, but it transforms your internal atmosphere so that the environment loses power over you. God's preservation also operates through timing. The scripture says, the Lord shall preserve your going out and your coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. That means his protection is synchronized with your movement. Wherever you go, preservation follows. Whatever you do, preservation covers. It's not limited by geography or time zones. You could be crossing a border, facing a meeting, entering a storm, yet the invisible hand of God travels with you. This is why accidents are avoided, why certain traps never catch you, why certain dangers dissolve before they appear. That's the spiritual law of preservation at work. But this law must be activated through relationship. God does not preserve you because you quote a verse. He preserves you because you are aligned with his voice. Relationship is the key that keeps the covenant alive. When your heart stays connected to him, his power stays connected to you. That's why prayer is essential. It's not a ritual. It's an alignment tool. Every time you pray Psalms 121, you are aligning your spirit with divine order. You are saying to the universe, I am governed by the law of heaven, not by the chaos of the world. And the moment that alignment happens, preservation activates automatically. Divine preservation is also generational. The same God who preserved Abraham from famine preserved Isaac from conflict and preserved Jacob from danger. The pattern continues to all who walk in covenant. It's a spiritual inheritance. When God says, I will preserve your going out, he means that your destiny, your lineage, and your legacy are under his control. The preservation that begins in your life can extend to your children, your household, your vision, your future. Evil may target generations, but the covenant of preservation covers bloodlines. Let's look deeper at how this law functions. Every law in the Spirit has a reaction. When faith is activated, preservation responds. When fear dominates, the shield weakens. That's why fear is the greatest weapon of evil. It disconnects you from divine covering. Faith, however, strengthens the shield. When you believe that God's word in Psalms 121 is absolute truth, you create a magnetic field of protection around you. Angels operate within that field. Evil loses access within that field. And miracles occur within that field. Faith is not just believing, it's participating in divine preservation. There is also a principle of obedience tied to this law. Preservation cannot coexist with rebellion. The covering of God protects what belongs to his will. The moment you step outside of his will, you step outside of his shield. That's why understanding purpose is so important. Purpose keeps you within divine jurisdiction. As long as you are walking in what God assigned, preservation is automatic. The safest place in the world is not a city, not a nation. It is the center of God's purpose for your life. That's where preservation lives. The spiritual law of preservation also governs timing. There are seasons when God delays certain things not to punish you, but to protect you. Sometimes, when doors don't open immediately, it's because He is preserving you from premature exposure. You may think it's rejection, but it's actually preservation. The law of preservation understands what you cannot see. It shields you from people, places, and opportunities that could damage your destiny. When you live with that awareness, you stop complaining and start trusting. You begin to realize that delay is not denial, it's divine defense. Another dimension of preservation is the protection of your destiny from internal sabotage. Sometimes the greatest threat to your future is not the enemy outside, it's the weakness within. Preservation works internally, guarding your heart from pride, your motives from corruption, your character from compromise. It keeps you humble, focused, and aligned. Evil may not only come in the form of harm, it can come disguised as opportunity, temptation, or distraction. But when you live under this law, your spirit recognizes danger even when it wears a friendly face. The ultimate goal of divine preservation is to ensure that your life fulfills divine intention. You were not sent to earth to survive, you were sent to accomplish. Evil seeks to shorten your journey, to drain your purpose, to silence your voice. But preservation ensures completion. It sustains you until your assignment is finished. That's why you're still here, because God's purpose in you is not yet complete. Every day that you wake up, Psalms 121 continues to echo over your life. The Lord shall preserve your going out and your coming in. That's your daily covenant reminder that you are not forgotten, not unprotected, not exposed. You are preserved by divine law. And when this law is active, even what was meant for harm begins to serve you. The traps set against you become testimonies. The weapons formed against you lose their power. The curses spoken against you turn into catalysts for blessing. Preservation does not only protect, it transforms. It converts what was meant for evil into a stage for God's glory. This is the mystery of Psalms 121. When you live under divine preservation, you no longer fear evil, you transcend it. You no longer run from battles, you walk through them untouched. You no longer beg for safety, you walk in authority. Because preservation is not about hiding from evil. It's about being empowered to stand in the midst of it without being consumed. And that, my friends, is the power of the spiritual law of preservation. Prayer is not merely communication with God, it is alignment with divine order. When you pray, you are not trying to convince heaven to act. You are positioning yourself to receive what heaven has already declared. Psalms 121 is not just a psalm to recite, it is a divine code that aligns your spirit with the will and protection of God. I will lift up my eyes unto the hills is not about geography, it is about focus. It is a spiritual posture that lifts your vision above fear, above confusion, and above human limitation. The moment your eyes shift upward, your spirit enters alignment. Prayer is the bridge between divine promise and earthly manifestation. Alignment through prayer means that your thoughts, emotions, and actions come under the government of the Spirit. The human spirit drifts naturally toward anxiety, doubt, and distraction, but prayer recenters it. When you pray, you are recalibrating your life to God's frequency. You are reminding creation who is in charge of your destiny. You are not speaking into the air. You are issuing divine commands into the unseen realm. Every time you declare Psalms 121, you are not just reciting words, you are activating the system of divine preservation that God designed to operate through prayer. In the spiritual realm, alignment determines access. You cannot walk in what you are not aligned with. That is why prayer must be more than repetition. It must be revelation. When you pray Psalms 121, you are aligning with a specific spiritual principle, the principle that God is your keeper, your defender, your watchman. And once alignment is achieved, protection becomes automatic. You don't need to chase miracles, you become a magnet for them. You don't beg for safety, you exist in safety. Because when your spirit aligns with heaven's order, your life begins to reflect heaven's peace. The reason many believers pray but still live in fear is because they pray without alignment. They speak words disconnected from understanding. They ask God to do what He has already done, not realizing that prayer is not about asking, it's about positioning. You cannot walk under the covering of Psalms 121 if your heart is misaligned with its truth. The Lord is your shade upon your right hand, means you must live in proximity to His presence. Shade only covers those who stand close enough. Alignment keeps you in that proximity. When you drift away in thought, worry, or sin, the distance increases, but prayer closes that gap. It brings you back into divine closeness, into the safe zone of His shadow. Prayer is the highest form of surrender. It is the language of dependence that invites divine intervention. When you lift your voice and declare the words of Psalms 121, you are surrendering your own ability to control outcomes and acknowledging the one who never sleeps nor slumbers. Alignment through prayer teaches you that your safety is not the result of your strength, it's the result of His sovereignty. Evil cannot touch what is hidden in surrender. The more you yield to God in prayer, the stronger your covering becomes. Because prayer does not make God bigger, it makes you smaller. And in that humility, divine power finds space to operate. Prayer transforms your atmosphere. Every word you speak in faith becomes a spiritual structure. Words are not empty, they are living instruments that build realities. When you say, "The Lord shall preserve me from all evil," the spirit realm takes notice. Angels begin to move. The law of preservation activates. Demonic interference is restrained. That's why the alignment of your words with divine truth is essential. When your words align with fear, you authorize evil. When your words align with faith, you authorize God. The power of alignment through prayer is not about volume, it's about agreement. When you agree with God's word, you release heaven's authority into your life. Every great movement of God begins with alignment through prayer. Alignment brings clarity, and clarity brings power. The psalmist said, "My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth." That declaration is not just praise, it's a repositioning. It means my dependence has shifted from man to God. Many people are unprotected because their trust is misplaced. They depend on systems, people, or resources that cannot preserve them. But when prayer realigns your trust, your help becomes supernatural. Alignment cuts off the illusion of self-sufficiency and reconnects you to divine supply. You see, prayer is not about bringing God into your situation, it's about bringing yourself into His presence. When you pray Psalms 121, you are not inviting God into your fear, you are stepping into His safety. The moment your heart aligns with His promise, your situation begins to transform. The forces of darkness lose authority over a life that is synchronized with divine will. Evil cannot touch alignment, it can only touch confusion. That's why prayer brings peace. Peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the proof of alignment. When your spirit and God's word agree, you carry peace even in the midst of storms. There is another dimension to alignment through prayer timing. Prayer aligns your timing with God's schedule. Sometimes protection is not about blocking an event but delaying it until you're ready. Prayer tunes your steps to divine rhythm. He will not suffer your foot to be moved, means your progress is governed by divine coordination. Alignment ensures that you are always in the right place at the right time. That's why some opportunities come when you least expect them. It's not coincidence, it's alignment. Heaven rearranges timing for those who walk in prayerful synchronization. Alignment also manifests through discipline. True prayer is not emotional, it's consistent. Evil thrives in inconsistency. When your prayer life fluctuates, your covering weakens. But when your prayer becomes a lifestyle, you become untouchable. Every morning you declare Psalms 121. You are reinforcing the wall of divine protection around your life. The enemy may study you, but he cannot penetrate what is reinforced daily through prayer. Alignment is not achieved by one powerful moment, it is maintained by continual devotion. The power of alignment through prayer also purifies motives. When you spend time in divine presence, hidden impurities are exposed and corrected. Prayer doesn't just change situations, it changes you. It refines your thoughts, purges your desires, and aligns your will with God's agenda. Many are preserved not because their environment changed, but because their heart did. When your motives align with divine intent, evil loses its legal right to interfere. Alignment makes you legally untouchable in the spirit realm. Prayer is also the atmosphere of revelation. When you align through prayer, you begin to see from God's perspective. You discern threats before they manifest. You sense danger before it materializes. The same Spirit who preserves you also informs you. Alignment sharpens perception. You no longer react to evil, you anticipate and neutralize it. You walk with the confidence of divine insight, knowing that nothing can surprise the one who walks in step with the Spirit. The power of alignment through prayer extends beyond protection. It affects destiny. Prayer does not only preserve your life, it propels it. When your spirit aligns with heaven, you start walking in divine acceleration. Delays are broken, blockages dissolve, paths open. Because alignment does not only defend, it advances. Evil seeks to delay destiny. Alignment restores momentum. That is why the most powerful people are not those who know how to fight evil, but those who know how to stay aligned with God. The alignment of prayer transforms even the smallest moments into miracles. When you declare the words of Psalms 121, your ordinary routine becomes sacred. Your drive to work, your walk outside, your sleep at night, all are under divine orchestration. Prayer does not always change the outer world immediately, but it creates invisible order within it. It positions everything around you to cooperate with divine will. That's why peace follows those who live in prayer. They have become one with divine rhythm. Evil cannot touch alignment because alignment is authority. When your will is one with God's will, you operate under His jurisdiction. The forces of darkness recognize divine order. They cannot invade what is under His governance. Every time you pray, you reinforce your divine citizenship. You remind the universe that you belong to a higher kingdom. And in that kingdom, the law is clear. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Alignment makes that law active and visible in your life. Through Psalms 121, prayer becomes the language of preservation. It's not begging God to protect you, it's activating what He has already promised. Alignment is the secret that turns prayer from repetition into power, from words into warfare, from emotion into authority. And once your life is aligned, no evil can touch you, because you are no longer positioned in fear, you are positioned in covenant. To live under the shadow of the Almighty is to exist in the realm of divine covering. It is not a physical location, but a spiritual position, a dimension where the presence of God becomes your invisible armor. Psalms 121 reveals this mystery in every line. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade upon your right hand. Shade represents protection, proximity, and presence. You can only experience shade when you are close to the source. To live under His shadow means to stay near enough that His presence filters everything that comes your way. Nothing touches you unless it passes through Him first. Living under the shadow of the Almighty requires intimacy. You cannot live far from God and expect His covering to be active. His shadow falls on those who walk beside Him. When your spirit stays in communion with Him, you live in continual protection. Evil may pass by, but it cannot enter. The shadow represents divine awareness. It follows you because His eyes are upon you. Just as a shadow moves when the object moves, His presence moves with you. You are never uncovered, never unguarded, never forgotten. The psalmist wrote, He will not allow your foot to be moved. That is what happens under divine shadow. Your footing becomes secure. Shadows protect from direct exposure. In the spiritual realm, that means you are shielded from the full intensity of evil's attacks. You are not untouched because evil disappears. You are untouched because His presence absorbs the impact. When arrows of fear, doubt, and destruction fly toward you, His shadow deflects them. The presence of God is not a symbol, it is a shield that sustains your stability. Living under the shadow also speaks of trust. You cannot remain in the shadow if you keep running into the light of your own understanding. Many people step out from divine covering because they seek control. They want to manage outcomes, fix situations, or prove strength. But under His shadow, your security depends on surrender. It means you no longer fight to survive. You rest to be sustained. The safest place on earth is the place of trust. Evil cannot penetrate rest because rest is the evidence of faith. When God said in Psalms 121, "The Lord shall preserve you from all evil," He was revealing the power of proximity. Preservation is the result of presence. The shadow of the Almighty is not distant, it is personal. You can feel it in peace that passes understanding, in moments where chaos should consume you but doesn't. His shadow is felt when doors close that would have destroyed you if they opened, when delays happen that later prove to be divine protection. Living under His shadow means your life is guided by unseen mercy, protected by invisible grace. There is a difference between visiting His presence and living in it. Many come to God only when crisis strikes. They visit His shadow but do not dwell there. Those who dwell in His shadow have made intimacy their lifestyle. They do not depend on emergency prayers. They live in constant communion. Every day, every hour, every decision is soaked in awareness of His presence. That's why their peace cannot be stolen. Living under the shadow means you have learned to abide, not just to appear. The shadow also represents divine consistency. Shadows do not sleep, they move as long as the source of light remains. God's presence never slumbers nor sleeps, which means his shadow never fades. Even when you are unaware, the covering remains. When you are asleep, his shadow watches. When you are weak, his shadow strengthens. When you are under attack, his shadow blinds the enemy's vision. Living under the shadow means that your defense is divine, not human. You don't have to see your protection to know it's working, you just have to stay close to the protector. Living under the shadow of the Almighty transforms how you interpret life. You begin to see delays as divine timing, disappointments as direction, and danger as discipline. You realize that everything allowed near you has purpose. Nothing random survives under his shadow. Even pain becomes purified. It cannot destroy you, it refines you. Evil loses its poison under his covering, because the shadow of his presence filters out what is harmful and leaves only what is useful for your growth. That is the mystery of divine preservation. Living under the shadow also redefines your identity. You are no longer an ordinary person trying to survive. You become a vessel of divine presence. You carry an atmosphere that repels darkness. Evil recognizes those who dwell under his shadow. It senses the covering and withdraws. That's why certain things that destroy others cannot touch you. The difference is not luck, it's location. You are located under divine jurisdiction. You are hidden in the presence that cannot be penetrated. There is power in being hidden. God often hides those he intends to use greatly. He covers them under his shadow to mature them, to teach them endurance, to prepare them for exposure. Living under the shadow is not always glamorous. It's sometimes lonely, misunderstood, quiet. But it's the safest place to be formed. Before God releases you into visibility, he trains you in secrecy. The shadow becomes your classroom. You learn trust, patience, and obedience there. You learn to hear his whisper in silence. And when you finally emerge, evil cannot touch you because you have been shaped in divine secrecy. Living under the shadow also brings perspective to warfare. Spiritual warfare is not always about shouting, it's about positioning. The enemy cannot strike what it cannot see. The shadow conceals you from demonic visibility. When your life is hidden in God, you are invisible to attack. That's why Psalms 121 says, "The sun shall not smite you by day, nor the moon by night." These are metaphors for protection from both visible and invisible forces. The day represents obvious attacks. The night represents hidden ones. Under the shadow, both are neutralized. There is a supernatural calm that comes from this awareness. When you truly understand that you live under divine shadow, fear loses its vocabulary. Worry becomes a foreign language. You stop reacting to threats and start responding with faith. You no longer panic about tomorrow because you know your keeper has already been there. Living under the shadow means every day begins and ends in assurance. Even in storms, you walk with composure because you are not standing in open exposure, you are covered. Living under the shadow of the Almighty also manifests through obedience. The shadow is maintained through alignment. When you disobey divine instructions, you step out from under the covering. Every act of obedience keeps you in position. It's not God who moves away from you, it's you who drifts when you choose independence. The safest way to stay covered is to stay surrendered. Every time you yield to his word, the shadow extends over you. Every time you resist his guidance, the covering retracts. That's why obedience is not restriction, it's protection. Under the shadow, peace is not circumstantial, it is positional. You don't feel peace because things are calm, you feel peace because you are covered. Even in crisis, there is quietness within you because divine proximity neutralizes fear. Evil cannot operate where peace reigns. Peace is the sound of the shadow, it silences the noise of destruction. That's why when you dwell under his covering, you carry peace into every place you go. People may not understand it, but they can feel it. You become a walking sanctuary of divine rest. Living under the shadow also empowers your words. When you speak from under his presence, your voice carries authority. Demons recognize the echo of divine covering. Your declarations carry weight, not because of your strength, but because of where you're standing. Words spoken under the shadow are words backed by heaven. That's why prayer from that place is effective. The closer you are to his presence, the more powerful your petitions become. Proximity amplifies authority. Living under the shadow is not about isolation, it's about insulation. You may walk among people, work in the world, face challenges, but you are insulated from corruption. The presence of God becomes your spiritual firewall. Evil may pass near, but it cannot infiltrate. You can be surrounded by chaos and still carry calm. That's what it means to live under the shadow. It's divine insulation, not withdrawal. You still engage with life, but life cannot penetrate your peace. Those who live under the shadow also learn divine discernment. You begin to sense danger before it manifests. The shadow communicates. The Spirit whispers warnings, redirects your steps, closes doors before harm reaches you. You may not always understand it, but later you'll see how divine covering guided you. The shadow is not silent, it's strategic. It moves in wisdom and foresight. Living under it makes your life prophetically directed, not emotionally driven. Ultimately, living under the shadow of the Almighty is living in awareness of His unbroken presence. You realize that every breath you take is supervised by divine love. Every moment is monitored by divine intelligence. Every step is secured by divine sovereignty. You stop chasing safety because you have become safety's dwelling place. You no longer pray for protection as if it's distant, you live in it as a daily reality. That is the essence of Psalms 121. To live under the shadow of the Almighty is to exist in continual preservation, where evil cannot touch you because you are wrapped in the presence of the Eternal One.